The following program is presented by Battling Opioids, a project of Pennsylvania Public Media.
Funding for this program was made possible by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Thank you.
For more than 75 years, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield has been committed to creating stronger, healthier communities through corporate grants, sponsorships, and program support. Learn more at highmark.com/community impact.
The opioid epidemic is changing the fabric of our country, reaching its destructive hands into all corners of our community. And now the epidemic is growing among women.
You surrender your ability to make sound decisions when you pick up a drug.
And when a woman is addicted, the suffering rolls out in waves. Children are hurt and neglected.
If the child is still in the home, there's a lot of trauma.
Foster care is overloaded.
Not only do they have their addiction, but they just have the loss of, child 1, 2, and 3.
And the burden lands perhaps most cruelly on the smallest victims.
Irritability, tremors where the babies are shaking their arms and their legs, difficulty eating.
When a woman is addicted to opioids, the effects spill onto the most vulnerable people around her.
So we were seeing the women coming in with no prenatal care, actively using heroin.
What can be done to reverse this troubling trend? How can the government, doctors, treatment centers, and the women themselves stop the suffering? What will it take to stem the tide of this opioid crisis that, more than ever, is hitting home?
Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Washington. I'm sure many of you will agree that epidemic is not too strong a word. Tonight we're talking about opioid addiction among women and the impact on families, children, and society. We'd like to welcome people from throughout Western Pennsylvania joining us here in the Fred Rogers studio at WQED, a place well known for community engagement, and that is a tradition that continues this evening. I am pleased to be joined by our social media host and WQED producer, Minette Seat. Minette.
Thanks, Lisa. We're inviting our studio audience to ask questions or make comments about the serious issues, and we'd like people outside of our studio to do the same. Post your questions on WQED's Facebook page or on Twitter using the hashtag HittingHomePGH. That's HittingHomePGH. And if you have friends or family outside of our broadcast area, this program is also being streamed live on our website at WQED.org/opioids. You can watch it there and also find additional content. Lisa, I'm looking forward to some thoughtful conversation and learning a lot from the folks here in our studio tonight.
I'm certain that that's going to happen, Minette. Thank you. Now, to give you a guide of where the conversation will go tonight, the increasing number of women addicted to opioids is certainly having an impact in our communities and on society as a whole. We'll also talk about how addiction among women is having a critical effect on families and children. And from a medical standpoint, we'll discuss babies who are dependent and the current trends in recovery for the adult addict. Now let's meet our guests. Cheryl Andrews is the Executive Director of the Washington County Drug and Alcohol Commission. Also joining us is Deborah McDonald. She is the Director of Women's Programs for the Allegheny Health Network. And Thelma Turner is a care navigator who brings life experience to her clients. Ms. Turner is a recovering addict. Ladies, thank you all so much for being with us this evening. Cheryl, I'll start with you. You see this epidemic up close. How devastating is the epidemic of women addicted to opioids?
It's very devastating. It's growing. More women are seeking help. In the past, women tended to maybe not want to come forward and seek help. So I want to tell you a little bit about my agency and what we do. I represent the single county authority. So throughout Pennsylvania, every county has a single county authority. And we are commissioned and contracted with the state to provide prevention, intervention, treatment-related services to all the residents within our county. So individuals who are in need of help and seeking help are able to contact the single county authority, and we are able to assist not only with finding treatment for individuals, but we subsidize that, we pay for the treatment, and then we also offer case management and recovery support services. So when we're looking at women specifically, one of the things that we need to continue to move forward is not just engaging them and getting them into treatment, but continuing those recovery supports following their treatment episode.
And Deborah, you're in the medical arena of this. Talk about the importance of treatment specifically designed for women.
I work with women, especially during pregnancy. And we know that drug addiction affects that individual along with their families, but it also affects the unborn child. It's really important for us to try to break down those barriers of care, those barriers of stigma that the women have to go through, so that they can come in and get the help that they need to have better outcomes for themselves and their baby. Our program is called Perinatal Hope, and that is really, we're giving hope to these women to change their lives and change their lives for their babies. We're there to help guide them, but they're the ones that are doing the work to change it.
Speaking of doing the work, Thelma, you've done the work. You are a former addict, now a care navigator. Explain to us what a care navigator is and how you got to that point.
A care navigator is exactly that. We have addicts who are referred to our program by programs like SCA or by family members. We actually invite family members if they have an individual in their family who's struggling with a substance use disorder to please refer them to us and let us try to work together with them to get them on a path of recovery and to get them on a path that will lead to some stability in their life. So when they're referred to us, we'll contact that client. If they're not ready to engage, we will stay connected with them. I think they're more receptive of people who are in recovery versus people who just have the education and haven't been where they've been. And we take them to treatment. If they don't have transportation, we will ride them. We try to also combat the other barriers that they face, like with transportation, with housing, with education, and with jobs.
Excellent, thank you. Some of the women on this panel and several people in our studio audience were interviewed for a recent WQED documentary called Broken. It focuses on women and opioid addiction. Here is a short clip with one mother sharing her story.
Mwah. Thanks, baby. I love you.
Love you more.
I love you more.
These are some of the few moments Chantel Ardino will spend with her children this week. She was visiting the home of her father and uncle, who are raising her infant daughter and 4- and 6-year-old sons. She came to share the story of how she got to this place in life, living in a halfway house and permitted just 2 hours of visitation each week. It all started with pills.
I noticed quick how addicted I came so quickly. And I definitely felt bad about it because I know what it was like to grow up with a parent as an addict. But it's like as soon as I did it the first time, I was already addicted and I didn't know what to do with it.
Her story is as common as it is heartbreaking. Her mother was an addict who was often absent. That led her to teenage drinking and eventually to a relationship with the wrong man.
And he kind of like filled that place for me of her not being around. And he had always supplied my drug addiction, which was pills at that time. And when I left him, I couldn't afford that, and that's when I switched to heroin.
By age 24, she was drowning in it. There was an arrest, probation, rehab, and relapse. Alone with 2 small boys, she failed a drug test and was sentenced to time in jail. She was pregnant with her 3rd child. In July 2017, after laboring alone in her cell, she was taken across town to Washington Hospital, where she delivered a baby girl who was born 2 months premature and addicted.
I called home one day. It was like 2-3 weeks after I had her. I called home from jail and I got told that while I was in jail that she could be possibly blind and deaf.
That was a clip from the award-winning WQED documentary, Broken: Women, Families, Opioids. And you can see the entire program on our website at wqed.org/opioids. The growing number of women addicts is having a major impact in our communities and society in general. We'll spend the next segment of our program talking about that. So now is the time to use social media with questions or comments on that topic. And Cheryl, let's go back to you. We're talking about treatment here. You see this up close in Washington County. How devastating is this in our communities?
It's very devastating. And as you saw in the clip, many women are introduced to opioids or prescribed opioids, and then maybe they can no longer get them or afford them, so they're turning to the street because they do not want to go through withdrawal. That is what someone with substance use disorder does not want to do. So they seek out other drugs like heroin off the street, and it's cheaper. So by the time they're in that spiraling position, it could lead to them committing crimes, prostituting, leaving their children unattended because the part of their brain that they need for reasoning and good choices has been hijacked because of the use of drugs. So individuals are we need to have interventions, and I like to think that in our community we're helping to start those interventions. One of them is having staff, having case managers at every intercept point. So if someone presents within children and youth, or presents in the hospital, or presents in the legal system, we have someone there that can begin to engage and start the assessment process and then engage them into treatment.
Thelma, could you add more to that? We talked about is there a stigma with the word addict, and people may be reluctant to get the treatment?
Yeah, I think the stigma in the community is the term addict. I think when they hear the term, the first thing they envision is the mother who neglects her child, who's in a room with a needle in her arm, who doesn't care, and who wants to be in that lifestyle. And I think what they don't recognize is it's a disorder, that they're actually being, once they introduce that drug into their system, their ability to make decisions has been crippled. When Cheryl referred to it as being hijacked, that's exactly what happens. You kind of become a hostage to the drug. And the decisions you make are to feed the need to have this substance that your body is requiring in your system.
And I'm sure that can only add, Deborah, to a cost in our community, the medical responders, just the community at large, and certainly in the medical profession.
Absolutely. In some ways that you don't even think about. We're looking at the family as well. So we look at the person who's going through addiction. What are they able to contribute to society? Are they able to work? And their next thought is on, where am I going to get this drug to help to ease the pain that I'm going through for withdrawal? But then we look at families and how they are suffering with their loved one who maybe is, they don't know where they're at. They're living on the streets. Are they okay? Are they safe? Is that loved one able to continue on with their job? Are they able to work? We also look at those families who have lost a child, a spouse, a father, a mother to drug addiction, heroin overdose. It really is devastating financially to our whole community at large, not just to that one individual.
And Thelma, you were saying once the drug enters the system, the person isn't able to reason well. Let's talk about prison versus the treatment cost. Is it cheaper? Is it easier to put this person who is now shoplifting or doing things illegal to get money to feed this habit versus treatment cost?
I know the person.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that we need to work with treatment. Putting them in jail is not going to solve our problem. We need to look at, yes, there should be penalties, of course there are, and there are consequences, but we need to look at this for what that person's going through. My whole comment that I have to say is that there is no person that I have ever talked to who has dealt with addiction that said, when I was a child, I wanted to grow up to be an addict. I wanted to not be able to work. I wanted to not know where I was going to lay my head or where I was going to get my next meal from. I want to go out and lose my family. Not one person has ever said that to me, that that's what they wanted. But that's where some of them have ended. So how do we help this? How do we correct it?
You want to add, Cheryl?
Yes, please. So substance use disorder is a chronic illness, much like diabetes, where people with diabetes don't always have perfect blood sugar. Same is true with someone who has a substance use disorder. So our whole theme, or our whole way to try to broach this subject is, if we keep putting them into jail, we're not changing anything. We're not breaking the cycle. We're not changing the behavior. We need to be able to engage them, place them into treatment, and allow for that behavior change to occur. One thing we do know for sure, we need to place that person in the appropriate level of care, and the longer we can keep a person engaged in treatment, the more likely that person will remain in recovery. So those are things that we have to work with, and putting them in jail is just not going to solve the problem.
Looks like we have a question from the audience. Manette.
I am here with Kim Rogers, Executive Director of the Washington County CYS. And Kim, you can certainly speak to the community impact. Did you have a question or a comment?
I have a little bit of both. First of all, I do want to thank WQED and Highmark for bringing us together as a community and increasing our public awareness. My question is for Cheryl Andrews. We work very closely together, Cheryl, and have a collaborative partnership with Children and Youth Services and Washington Drug and Alcohol Commission. I'm wondering from you, can you tell us a little bit about your vision and your hope for our community in Washington County?
Great question.
I would love to. One of the things that we've developed in Washington County is a opioid coalition. We bring all the key stakeholders together, and if you would have asked me 2 years ago if we could have brought all these people to the table to discuss this issue, and that people would work really, really hard to make a difference in stemming the tide of overdose deaths and people with substance use disorder, I would have never believed you. And my vision is that we continue the momentum that we've started, that this coalition has been started. We have a strategic plan. Everybody plays a part, and we meet consistently. And with all the systems working together, we will have an impact. For so many years, drug and alcohol was supposed to fix this problem, and it's not just our problem. It's a community and a systemic problem, and we all need to be part of the solution.
Thelma, you're a care navigator. What do clients need? She's talked about having this coalition. What's necessary for them to have the successful treatment and recovery?
Well, what we try to link clients with is the treatment. Treatment is key, and the more treatment that's available, as long as they're willing to stay engaged in treatment, the greater the chance of success. It's like the intersection between willingness and availability has to be there.
How do you foster that? I mean, you have the life experience. I'm sure you can relate to your clients. How do you foster that to encourage treatment?
I think that my life alone is a living example to them that there is hope, that you can actually rebuild. I struggled for more than 30 years. I have 3 years clean and sober. I share that with the individuals I speak with. I know that most individuals who are in a substance use disorder situation are miserable in their life. It's not a happy existence, it's a miserable existence. And I think they're looking for someone to pull them in the direction of hope and to link them with the services that can make a difference in their life and to walk with them through this process, because we don't let go once they get into treatment. When they're released from treatment into aftercare, we stay engaged with them. If they relapse, we'll go to their homes and find them. If they want to go back to school, we link them with the services that will help them accomplish that goal. And we continue to just walk along with them in this path. I think it's a personal relationship we build with these individuals, that they have someone they can trust and rely on to help them navigate through this process.
And so it's staying engaged. Manette has a question from the audience.
Hi, Lisa. Our next guest is Rosa Davis. Rosa is Executive Director of POWER. Rosa, please tell us first, what is POWER and what do you guys do?
POWER is an organization dedicated to providing recovery support services and treatment specifically to women and families who are struggling with substance use disorders.
So a lot of what we've been talking about tonight is really relevant to what you do every day.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have a question or comment?
A little bit of both also, actually. I had a question, and I think Thelma kind of answered it for me. First of all, congratulations. We have a peer recovery support program, and I wish you were working for us, with us. So my question was going to be about treatment, and as a provider, we're always asking ourselves, what could we do differently? What could we have done to better engage someone and keep them in treatment longer? And I think in a way you answered by so beautifully explaining the role of a peer mentor or navigator, and combined with treatment, how powerful that is. So my second part of the question then is, I think sometimes we forget how critical that transition is from treatment to back to the community on your own, right? And in fact, a lot of our outcome studies show that while almost everything improves while in treatment, the one thing that gets worse when women are discharged is their anxiety and depression. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice, any of you, but in particular Thelma, about what we can do as a community and a treatment provider community to help ease that transition and ensure that women have every opportunity to be successful after treatment.
Thank you, Rosa.
I believe that the Centers of Excellence in the job of the navigator actually has been proving to make a difference, because we do stay connected, and a lot of the barriers they faced are with housing or with getting employment. So we advocate for them. You know, I'm a person who had a struggle with my landlord, didn't want to rent to an addict who had a criminal record, and I told him I've made some poor decisions, but I'm a good person. All I'm asking for is an opportunity for me to show you that we do recover. And I don't think there's enough information out there that shows people do recover and become productive members of society. So what we do is we try to link them with housing that will give them the chance to start to rebuild their lives. And then their sense of confidence and their sense of self-worth begins to get restored. We link them with mental health treatment, because a lot of times when you struggle with an addiction, you find that depression and anxiety start to surface, and they need to get therapy for that. And so we link them with mental health treatment. We try to link them with jobs that will hire people who are in recovery and help them to rebuild their lives.
Great perspective, Thelma. And so I will turn to you, Deborah. When you couple what Thelma has said with a woman who's expecting a child, maybe her first, maybe her third or fifth, I don't know, that only adds another layer of concern.
Wonderful.
And harder work for you, I'm sure.
You're absolutely right, but I think the key, what you said, Thelma, is absolutely correct. But I think we also need to make sure that when we look at this woman, we're looking at the total woman, not just her problem with addiction or substance use disorder. We need to look at, how did she get to where she is? What do we need to do to help to intervene with maybe some of those issues that have occurred to got her there? It might be something that had to do with childhood events that occurred or trauma in her life. It might be something to do with mental illness that is going on that we need to have someone. We have a women's behavioral health program that actually works with women for anxiety, major mood disorders, things like that, that if we are only dealing with a substance use disorder, we're only dealing with that addiction, and we're not addressing the other, we're putting a Band-Aid on this problem. And we really need to address every aspect. And housing is key. Transportation, childcare, asking someone who's dealing with other issues to balance all of this on her own and figure it out is really unfair, and it's unjust to what we're doing with them.
We need to see the total person.
Absolutely.
We have a question from social media. Manette.
Deanna from Twitter has asked, opioid use is a disease requiring treatment, not incarceration. How do we get treatment in the community where and when women need it?
Cheryl, I'll pose that one to you.
Well, actually, if you go to the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs website, they actually have all the gender-specific treatment options available throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Also, the state has been given an opportunity to expand women's services. By that I mean they have submitted for money from the federal government to expand actual gender-specific women's services in the state of Pennsylvania. We lack in providers that allow women to take their children to treatment. So as a single county authority and working within our counties, we are going to be charged by the state to be looking at special initiatives or programming that we could really start to implement within our counties. One area that I think we could really work together in is with the Children and Youth and Family Services. Within their department, identifying individuals and coming up with special initiatives in that regard.
So sort of a model for the counties.
Absolutely.
Cheryl, thank you. Our program is called Hitting Home, and home is where our conversation will focus next on how this epidemic is changing the family dynamic. And again, we invite you to share your thoughts on that issue on social media now. And Thelma, I know you said you struggled for about 30 years. Yes. The family impact, I'm sure, had to be something that, you know, was troubling for you, in addition to your addiction.
Right. I would say the most difficult part, as I shared in the documentary, was the impact my choices had on my daughter. I think she felt that I couldn't possibly love her if I was choosing to live in the life I was living. I don't know that she could understand that I wasn't able to help myself. And it wasn't my desire as much as it was my disorder. And it fractured our relationship. And I watched her grow really close to my mother and my sister. And I felt myself jealous that I couldn't step up to the plate and be the mother she deserved. And that maybe I could never have that place in her life, but she always kept the door open. And after I got clean and sober, my daughter invited me to not only be a part of her life, but to be a part of her children's lives. I have very solid, wholesome relationships with them today, so it's come full circle, you know. And I have women who struggle with the fact that their children are in CYS care and feel that same hopelessness I once felt. And I always tell them, my life has changed for the better. My daughter has wrapped her arms around me, and so there is hope, you know, for the children and for the mother as well.
Thank you for sharing that heartfelt emotion. We can all connect with you and feel for you. So glad that you are recovering, that you are clean and sober now. Manette, a social media question.
This speaks directly to what you were just talking about. From Twitter, how can we better maintain the integrity of the family unit while parents access treatment?
Can I speak
Sure.
to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the things that we are trying to do, and we know that it's important to try to keep mom and baby together, right? And mom and her children together. Those children need her mother. However, we want to make sure that the mother's doing okay and able to take care of her child. And being in the program or in a program is so important. With us, with the Perinatal Hope program, from the time that they found out that they're pregnant and they come into our program, we work on that education piece. We work together with POWER, the Pennsylvania Organization for Women in Early Recovery, to help them to be strong enough to be able to take their children home. We've also worked with CYF to know that when they're in a program, they're on Subutex, they're on methadone, they're maintaining that program, that those children are going to stay with that mother when they go home. And it gives that mother that trust to be able to come forward to ask for help, and that's what we really want them to do. It's the mom who's afraid to come forward to say, I have a problem, or to go into a rehab treatment center or an intensive outpatient treatment, or even into a program like ours to receive continuous drug and alcohol counseling along with their prenatal care. Those are the ones that are at risk for not having their children whenever they go home after they have their baby. But we are here not to place blame, not to point fingers, not to put that stigma out there for these women, but to really try to help them, to get them on that path that they need to go on. And
so,
really keep that family together.
And so then I would ask you, Deborah, when the mom is going through treatment and she's not available to care for her children, how taxing is it on the other family members? Thelma, you said that your mother stepped in and was caring for and raising your daughter. We saw Chantel in the piece in the documentary. She has her father and her uncle raising her children. How hard is that? I mean, sometimes you may have family who's willing to do that or who may not be willing to take on that. It's a huge responsibility.
It really is. It's a major responsibility. Those children need someone to care for them. And again, the mother wants to be a part of that life, and sometimes that's even hard too on the family that's raising the child, if the mother's coming and going and not a part of that life and explaining that. I think that what we're doing right now and what this show here is doing is bringing to the forefront the major problems that are out there. It's complex, it's not simple, it's not one answer that's going to solve this. It's many different things that are going to have to come into play to help that success for that child, for that mother, and for her family, extended family that's helping to care for that child. It's not an easy answer.
Cheryl, you want to add?
I think it's very important too that we're constantly educating and cross-training the different systems. Because it's very easy for us, this is what we do every day, engaging people, talking about treatment, but other systems really aren't in line necessarily with what we do. Okay. So, for instance, even children, youth, and families, going in, training staff so that they can understand what someone is going through who has a substance use disorder. They don't want to not have the children in their care. It's just at that particular time, they can't do that. And so the goal would be that all systems are communicating and being educated. And one of the biggest problems is our inability maybe to communicate effectively and share information. And hopefully we get to a point where we can share information for the betterment of that family and that woman.
And it goes to what Deborah said of seeing the whole woman just beyond her addiction. We have another question from the audience.
Hi, Lisa. I'm with Gina Noel Brown. Gina is a drug and alcohol counselor and a case manager. Gina, you must be able to speak directly to what they've been talking about. Did you have a question?
I had a question to Thelma. When you were going through your process and establishing relationship with your family, have you been able to use that to help other women who are dealing with the shame and guilt? Kids are in the CYF system, trying to find housing, employment with, say, several felonies. How do you go about assisting women who are facing these challenges?
I have a list at work of companies that will hire ex-felons. I think it helps to connect with people who don't. That stigma doesn't interfere with their willingness to work with you. For women who struggle because their relationship with their children is broken, I just encourage them when they're on the right path to get involved but stay consistent, because children need consistency in their life more than anything else. It took me a long time to step up to the plate, but once I did, I'm consistent, I'm reliable, and I'm available. And I couldn't say that 3 years ago.
Thelma, I like what you said about your landlord who didn't want to rent to a former addict, and you said, I made some poor choices, I'm a good person. How do we work as a community, all of us, to remove that stigma with addict or even former addict?
Right. I think the best way to combat it is the language. I think when people hear the term addict, they immediately shut down. They have this image of this person who chooses to be in this life, and they don't recognize that it's a disorder and they are incapable by themselves without treatment of stopping. They need to feed this animal inside of them. And so I think if the community would recognize that these individuals who live amongst us are not second-class citizens. You know, they deserve respect. They are struggling with a disorder that needs treatment, and even if they are not a direct part of your life, they will affect your life indirectly. So when we help the community and those who struggle within our community, we help the entire community. But if we refuse to help them and we let this epidemic continue to manifest, it's going to impact us in a horrific way. So what can we do to make a difference? If there's someone you know who's struggling, refer them to treatment. Contact drug and alcohol. Contact us. We'll go find them. You know, help them get their lives. Be willing to give a person who's in recovery a chance. If someone knocks on your door and they want to rent an apartment or they want to work at your company, don't allow their poor decisions in the past to stop you from giving them an opportunity, because they deserved it. It's a hard job to work your way back to being a productive member of society. And I say stay a little open-minded. Get to know someone. I think if people in recovery wore purple for a day, the society would be shocked to see how many people have recovered and are productive members of our society. They're doctors, they're business owners, they're directors, they're all over the society. I think that they don't see the people who recover, they just see the ones who are in the street struggling in the addiction. But be more open-minded, be more receptive, be more willing to guide them in the right direction, and not close the door on them. I think that would make a big difference.
Powerful words, an interesting perspective. We have a question from social media.
Our viewer is wondering, how can early intervention break the cycle of opioid addiction in families? And I'm wondering myself, is there such a thing as too early to start breaking the cycle?
Early intervention.
No, I think we need early intervention. Grade school. We need to be teaching in grade school the risks, what actually is happening with it. First off, I like to step back for 1 second. We talk about addiction, substance use disorder as if it's just heroin, someone shooting up, right, with heroin. But we got to stop and step back and look at how did some of these people get here. A lot of them, well over 80%, started out with prescription medications and then ended up not able to afford it, not getting the prescription any longer, and then using out on the streets. And again, drug use does not, or addiction, substance use disorder does not discriminate. It affects the old, the young, the rich, the poor, black, white. It does not matter. Every one of us can be affected. My saying is, but by the grace of God, this could have been me. So we all need to step back and look at how we address it and how we look at it and how we're going to help in this problem that's out there. We need to start early with prevention. If we're waiting until, for me, they're pregnant and actively using, we're a little bit too late. I mean, we need to start some point, and to me, starting in pregnancy, that woman has the incentive to change her life. So that's the time when we have their attention. When someone walks into the emergency room and they're actively using drugs, let's not just say they're an addict. Let's look at them and say, they have a disorder. This is an opportunity that we have to maybe change that person's life. So if we start with prevention and education, we start in grade school, we go out and work with all the people that are there. And talking about the young people, let's talk about the senior citizens who may have already been on medications. You know how many people are dying that are in their 40s and 50s and 60s from overdose, unintentional overdose, because they're on Oxycontin. They're on some type of form of an opioid. I mean, we really need to start with the prevention, and early on. It's never too early.
Never too early.
I'd like to have Cheryl tell you about the school education programs. I mean, I think they're wonderful.
I think she covered it pretty well.
Excellent.
We're out there, we're doing it, but intervention has another side. I mean, yes, we want to intervene before individuals get connected with the criminal justice system, yes, or CYS, and so those are areas where that's where putting the services out there and making sure people know where they can call and get help. So that is why I would like to say for every county, there is a single county authority of which you can Google it, it would come up, where can I get help?
Yes.
So people need to know that they can access treatment. There's also Overdose Free PA. It's a website. It's local, it's run by Pitt, and it has most of our connections, contact information for all of Western Pennsylvania.
With the resources that
Correct.
are available. So we certainly hope that people can get that information,
Yes.
and it is readily available. We have a question or comment from the audience.
Hi, Lisa. I'm with Laura Williams. Laura works for the Department of Health Services Administration at the Allegheny County Jail. Laura, you had a comment you wanted to share.
I had kind of a question and a comment. So women are plagued with insecurity, doubt, shame, stigma, you know, so many different obstacles and barriers. And I'm always so encouraged to hear about the Perinatal Hope program. I'm curious about the outcome measures and if we would be looking to expand this not just to women's perinatal care, but also screening earlier, talking about intervention, doing this at pediatrician offices, asking better screening questions and see how families are doing so that we can make better attempts to prevent and keep that family unit intact.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you know about the Perinatal Hope program. It's really important for us to get that word out, and we are going out into the community right now to take the care to the communities where the women are living. We're also working with a lot of community agencies and doing education. So when we look at like Early Head Start or any other program that where we might have women of childbearing ages, we're going out and talking with them. And it's so important to me that when we are talking with the women, we're also addressing contraception. Do you know over 90% of the women that are in our program had their pregnancy was unintended. It was not planned, and they didn't have the means to be able to get long-acting reversible contraception. So one of the things that I really am working with our area in AHN is talking with our pediatricians, talking with our family medicine docs before they ever come to me pregnant and ask, what are your plans for becoming pregnant in the next year? And then making sure that if it's not planned to get pregnant, it's their choice, but if it's not planned to get pregnant in the next year, to give them that information so that they can move in the right direction. While we're talking to it, we can use ESPER to find out really what risks do they have? Is it alcohol? Is it drugs? Cigarettes? You know, where do we need to help to address some of the issues that they may be having, and then get them into the help then. As soon as we can identify it. Again, it's the stigma that a lot of people just don't feel comfortable yet saying that I have a problem. But shows like this will help people to realize that there are more people out there than what we realize, and that by speaking up, and there's help out there for them.
Very good to know. And the smallest victims have no voice in all of this. We're going to spend some more time talking about that, and also the current treatment for women addicts. That is our next topic if you're connecting with us on social media. And Deborah, I will go back to you because you're saying seeing these women even before they are pregnant, knowing their plans, but then there are other women who come. There are those babies who are not born addicted, you said, but dependent. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that one of the misconceptions out there, and people say it all the time, and it's something that really bothers my heart. The baby is not born addicted. It is important for everyone to understand they are born dependent, and yes, they will go through withdrawal. Withdrawal for the newborns is not easy, and it does tug at your heart when you see a baby going through withdrawal. When they're going through withdrawal, they are more irritable. They may have a high-pitched cry when they're crying. They feed poorly. They may have tremors, watery stools, and then they get excoriated or a really sore bum where the skin's breaking down and very uncomfortable. And in more severe cases, then they can have seizures as well.
Is that easy to recognize? If the mother hasn't come forward and hasn't said, I have a problem, I'm addicted to opioids, can you spot it once that baby is born?
Not always right away, and that's one of the issues that I can see occurring. Typically, we have a baby in the hospital 2 to 3 days, depending on vaginal delivery or cesarean section. So you can usually see some form of withdrawal, something going on, somewhere between 2 to 3 days. Others, it may be 5 days, depending on what that mother took when the last time she had something. Even babies, moms who are in treatment, let's say with methadone, moms who are taking a pain pill for a bad back or another problem, that baby is still going to go through withdrawal. Just because it's prescribed, it's still an opioid, and that baby will still go through withdrawal. So some babies will not require any medication for that. It just really depends on the severity of their symptoms. And then if their symptoms are a lot worse, then we are going to treat them to help them with that withdrawal. What we found with this program that we have with Perinatal Hope Program, I'm so proud of this because we're really making a difference. Over 90% of our patients have had babies that did not need to have any medication for withdrawal. They are identified. We watch them when they're in the hospital. When we know that a baby is born with a mother who has an opioid use disorder, we watch them for 5 days because it might not show up right away. But our babies are able to go home with their mothers. We have had a few babies that came to us, mothers came to us late in pregnancy. We will not turn anyone away. So they come to us at 37 weeks. We're not going to be able to make a great difference before that delivery, but we do help. And those babies have had to stay in the hospital for medication treatment. One of them had to be transferred out. It is difficult, but what I can tell you is that we've seen 89% compliance with all OB visits, drug and alcohol counseling with us, and with their substance use disorder treatment with Subutex. So we've seen great results that way. And if you have a second, I'd like to tell you just very quickly about one woman who is in our program who had her baby. Her first child was taken away from her, and she was not able to care for that child. She came to our program with this pregnancy, and she was scared and afraid of judgment. But she got through our program, and since then the baby did well, did not need to go into treatment. Mother remained free of opioid.
Yes.
And she went home with her baby. Within a few weeks after, about 6 weeks later, she got her other child back, and they're both together. She has just come in to visit with us with her child in her stroller and her other little boy, and it was just beautiful to see them together. She actually is now sitting on our committee. So we have a steering committee. So she's a part of our steering committee so that we know how best to help people. Thelma, it's people like you who have gone through this, who are able to share your story and help us to help others. And that's what she's able to do too. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. And I'm sure having your child is the greatest reward from this. We have a social media question.
What can providers do to help mothers who struggle with addiction? And I guess they mean healthcare and service providers. How can you help these moms who are struggling?
And Cheryl, you were talking about having those resources and making sure that these mothers are aware of those. How can we help that?
I think some of that can be disseminated through the various agencies that women may present. So that would be one way. Another way would be for us to really, as the overseer of treatment within our counties, respective counties, that we really do need to look at best practices and develop programming that would be gender specific. It's very, very important. We all know men and women are made up differently. We're biologically different.
Yes.
Women can tend to become addicted much more quickly than a man, and women carry a lot of different emotional baggage, if you would. And so all of those things need to be dealt with. And I really believe that the awareness that's been created around this whole epidemic, and now more specifically for women, that is the trend, that is the movement, that is the way that we will be progressing.
We have another question from the audience. Manette.
I'm joined by Adrienne Smith. Adrienne is in long-term recovery, and she also works as a mentor for women in recovery. Adrienne, first, thank you for sharing your story and for being here tonight. What would you like to ask the panel?
Many times when women with babies and children are released from the hospital or jail or treatment, they don't have a safe, stable home to go to. And without that safe, stable home, oftentimes it's difficult to work on and sustain recovery. So what type of programs or services do your organizations have for these women?
So I'll start. So one of the things that I would like to say I take great pride in is about 2 years ago we began to target the systems that women would present in. By that I mean we have what's called targeted case management or specialized case management. So we have embedded staff within the jail, within the court, within probation, within the hospital, within the school system. And basically what we're doing is if someone is entering those systems, we can immediately embrace that, engage them if they need treatment, send them to treatment, but then the flip side of that is that we're following them and keeping them engaged as they're coming back into the community. We have a very strong recovery house community. Recovery houses they're not treatment, but it's a safe living environment where people who are working on recovery can all live together and be accountable to one another. So we have a very strong recovery community, and I know other communities are building that as well, but I think that is key, making sure that when that individual is coming back into the community,
yes,
that we are aware and part of that discharge planning and wrapping those services around them. Housing is huge, and we have even solicited certain landlords who would allow individuals with a criminal background to be able to reside there.
And I'm sure that's where people like Thelma come in. Let's get to another audience question, then we'll delve into that some more. Manette.
Lisa, I'm with Whitney Menarchek. She is the Director of Substance Use Programs at the Allegheny County Jail. Whitney, what question do you have?
My question actually is for Thelma. I run the program for women at the jail, and actually they're watching tonight. They face the very difficult decision of having already been away from their children. Whenever release comes, do they go to treatment where they could be removed from their children longer, or do they go home? Thelma, I was wondering, what advice or words of wisdom would you give to those women who are watching and trying to make that difficult decision?
I feel like when I was in my active addiction and I went to prison, that it was just hitting the pause button. I got no treatment, and I didn't feel like when I came out I was going to be any more responsible than I was when I went in. Treatment is key. Building that foundation of recovery that's strong will make the difference in their process. If they come home only having been in jail and been abstinent and don't get the appropriate treatment, chances are they'll use again. So I say treatment first. It has to be the priority, and then she can work on the relationship with the children and be dependable and be responsible and be willing, be capable of stepping up to the plate.
And that has to be a difficult question, though. I mean, you're saying a difficult decision to a mom who hasn't been with their child. I'm getting out of jail or prison now. I can go home to my baby, or I can go to treatment for however long and still be away from my child. That has to be difficult.
I'm sure it is, but you want to bring home to your child a healthy, stable mom. It does you no good to come home clean, struggling with the addiction. Getting that foundation of recovery is crucial in the process of long-term sobriety. And I wanted to say real quickly, just to piggyback off what Cheryl was saying about how they help people who have children who struggle with housing. Washington County does have one for people coming out of rehabs with children, a halfway house that provides housing for mothers with children. In addition, we have a mission. It had been closed due to a fire, but it will be opening again, and it has housing for women with children where they'll have their own independent room and they can begin to work on rebuilding their lives and saving money for their independent housing. So there's not enough. We need funding and we need more programs that allow them to live in that transition, but there are some available.
To have mom with child. Let's get to one more social media question.
Here's our last one. The mother is addicted and estranged from her daughter. The mother wants to reconnect with her daughter. Does Thelma have any advice on how to start reconnecting? This is from a viewer on Facebook.
I would say first work on getting yourself healthy, because the proof is in the pudding. I told my family many times, I'm going to do it this time. I'm serious. I want to get better. I want to be in your life. But until I actually did it, put the work behind the words, they weren't open to really embracing and trusting me. But when I actually gave in and started changing the decisions I was making, and I worked on staying clean and sober, I found that it made all the difference in the world. So I say work on getting yourself clean and sober. When they see the changes in you, you may not have to reach out to them. They may reach out to you first.
Deborah, closing thoughts.
I think that when we look at recovery, we got to realize it's not a quick fix and that they're in it for a long run. It's not something when you're talking about going back and seeing your child or going into recovery. You go into recovery, you spend the time there that you need, you're going to have a lifetime with your child. If you don't do that, you may have lost a lifetime with your child.
Cheryl.
And it goes back to, again, educating the systems, because our systems are not set up to be embracing the length of time that it takes for someone to truly recover and get well. And so we really need to be working on developing programs, for one, where in jails, women and men should be able to go to treatment and get that help they need and get time served if truly they're in there because of a substance use disorder that caused their criminality. And that's kind of what our job is, along with the legal department, to figure out, are they criminals, or are they having to do criminal behavior to feed their addiction?
Okay, Thelma, 10 seconds.
I'd say for anyone listening who's having a struggle, or anyone who has a family member having a struggle, reach out for help. It's out there. You can change the path in your life. It's just a matter of picking up that phone and saying help.
Ladies, thank you so much. Cheryl, Deborah, Thelma, thank you again. This has been tremendous, robust conversation, and I'm sure many people have benefited from. Now, if you would like to learn more about our ongoing coverage of the opioid crisis in Western Pennsylvania, you'll find it on our website, WQED.org/opioids, where you can watch documentaries, see digital first content, get resources, and so much more. WQED is also proud to be taking part in a statewide initiative where all of Pennsylvania's public television stations will be sharing content and joining forces in a project called Battling Opioids. I'm Lisa Washington, and for Minette Seed and the entire team that brought you this program, thank you so much for watching.
Funding for this program was made possible by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Thank you.
For more than 75 years, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield has been committed to creating stronger, healthier communities through corporate grants, sponsorships, and program support. Learn more at highmark.com/community impact.
The preceding program was presented by Battling Opioids, a project of Pennsylvania Public Media.